The sun beat down relentlessly, unforgiving and cruel. A barren stretch of cracked earth shimmered under the scorching heat, a desert landscape where hope had no place. The puppy, emaciated and gasping for breath, lay crumpled against the parched ground, its tiny body trembling with exhaustion. Its fur, matted with dirt and sweat, clung to its fragile form as the heat seemed to swallow everything around it. The world felt impossibly still, the harsh silence punctuated only by the occasional, distant call of a bird. There was no one here. No one to see the small, defenseless creature left behind, abandoned in the sweltering desert with no water, no food, and no chance. The puppy's eyes, though sunken and glazed with pain, still held a flicker of life. Its heart, though weak, was still beating. It was a faint, fragile sound in a world where everything else had stopped, fate hanging on a thread. And as the hours passed, the sky above grew darker, the heat of the day slowly relenting to the cool evening air. But in the distance, a figure appeared, a small silhouette growing larger as it approached. Drawn by the softest sound, a whimper barely carried on the wind. The puppy's breath hitched, the faintest hope stirring in its chest. Could it be? Could someone actually be coming to save it? This was not the end for the puppy, not yet. Not as long as its heart kept beating. Show your love, hit like, share, and subscribe for more. The desert stretches endlessly, an unforgiving land of heat and dust. The sun, a fiery ball in the sky, beats down mercilessly on the cracked earth below. In the midst of this desolate landscape, a tiny body lies still, barely moving, struggling to breathe. A German shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, is abandoned in the heat, its small body weakened by dehydration. The dirt clings to its fur, its ribs visible beneath the matted coat. Its eyes, though cloudy and sunken, still flicker with life, as though clinging to the last bit of hope. The puppy's small chest rises and falls in shallow breaths, each one more labored than the last. It's been hours, maybe longer, since it last had any water, any sustenance. The heat, the cruel heat, presses down on the pup's fragile form, but its spirit still flickers faintly, fighting against the odds. The world around it is silent, save for the distant sound of a bird circling above. No one is here, no one is coming. Or at least, that's what the puppy believes. But then, through the silence, a faint sound reaches its ears. A soft whimper, the sound of something alive, something coming closer. The puppy's ears twitch. A faint glimmer of awareness. The soft whimper grows louder, more distinct. Its body, too weak to move, remains on the hot earth, but its eyes widen slightly. There is a chance, a small, almost insignificant chance, that help is coming. But is it too late? The ground beneath it feels like fire, the air thick with the scent of dry earth and the distant tang of smoke. The puppy's once pristine fur is now covered in grime, and its tiny paws are cracked and bleeding. It is barely holding on, but its heart still beats, faintly, against the weight of the world. For a moment, it thinks about giving up. It thinks about closing its eyes and succumbing to the heat, to the loneliness, to the pain. But then, the sound of footsteps grows nearer. The puppy's eyes flutter open, and for the first time in what feels like forever, it sees a figure in the distance, a woman. She appears like a vision from the depths of a dream, a silhouette in the harsh light, her steps quick but careful. She sees the puppy crumpled on the ground, and something inside her shifts. She doesn't pause. She doesn't hesitate. She drops to her knees beside the dog, her hands trembling as she reaches out. "Hey there," she whispers softly, as if she's speaking to a child, to a friend. "I've got you." The puppy's small head lifts, its eyes wide and filled with a mix of confusion and fragile trust. The woman scoops it up, cradling its tiny, trembling body in her arms. She feels the warmth of the pup's skin against her own, the weight of its exhaustion pressing into her chest. "You're going to be okay," she murmurs, though she's not sure she believes it herself. But she knows she has to try. She has to help. With every ounce of her strength, she rises to her feet, clutching the puppy close to her chest. The heat of the desert is still relentless, but for the first time, there is hope. She doesn't know how long this little one has left, but she won't let it go without a fight. "Stay with me," she says softly, as she begins the long walk back to her car, back to safety. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, an unbroken sea of sand and heat. The car's engine hummed steadily as the protagonist kept her hands gripped firmly on the wheel, her focus unwavering. But even as the tires rolled smoothly over the cracked earth, her mind was elsewhere. It was a struggle to push the fear from her thoughts, but she couldn't escape it. The fear that she might not make it in time, that she had found the puppy too late, that the exhaustion and dehydration had already stolen its chance at life. With every mile, the landscape shifted from dry, barren stretches of land to dusty hills and scattered shrubs. The horizon seemed to stretch on forever, offering no reprieve from the relentless sun. The air in the car was thick and still, and despite the air conditioning, it felt as if the heat was creeping in from every side. The sense of urgency was palpable, clinging to her like a weight. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel, her knuckles pale, and she knew that the puppy was hanging by a thread, fragile and broken, caught between life and death. She glanced down at the small, wriggling form in the passenger seat. The puppy's body lay on a blanket, its breathing shallow, its fur clinging to its skin in patches of dirt and sweat. Its eyes were closed, its tiny body trembling as it fought for breath. She could feel its weight, its frailty. With every breath she took, and the guilt and helplessness that accompanied it began to creep back in. She wished there was more she could do. She wished she could reverse the hours of suffering it had already endured. But there was no time. All she could do now was get to the clinic as fast as possible, hold on to whatever shred of hope she could, and pray that it was enough. As the road stretched on, the landscape became more remote, the silence heavy in the air. There was no one around. Just the vast emptiness of the desert, its endless expanse serving as a reminder of how alone they truly were. The puppy's whimpers had faded to nothing more than a soft whine, but the fear hadn't left her. Every passing minute felt like an eternity, every second slipping further away from her grasp. The car's engine hummed steadily beneath her, but her pulse raced, her mind swimming with thoughts of what might come next. The puppy had been left behind, abandoned in a place where survival was a battle against the elements. And now, the weight of that abandonment pressed down on her, heavy and unbearable. She had found it just in time, but what if she hadn't? What if the puppy had been left there to die alone? She could feel her heart hammering in her chest at the thought. She glanced over at the puppy, its small form twitching slightly, its mouth opening and closing as it fought for breath. She leaned closer, her eyes searching for any sign of consciousness. The puppy's little paw twitched. It was alive, at least for now. But for how much longer? She could feel the air around her growing warmer, the weight of the journey pressing down on her shoulders. It was getting harder to focus, harder to keep the fear at bay. Her throat felt dry, and the air in the car seemed to close in on her, suffocating her with the pressure. "Stay with me," she whispered to the puppy, her voice rough and filled with raw emotion. "We're almost there. Just a little longer." The words felt empty, meaningless. She wasn't sure if the puppy could hear her, but she said them anyway, desperate for some kind of connection. She reached over and gently stroked the puppy's head, her fingers trembling as they brushed through its fur. The puppy's tiny body felt like a lifeline, fragile and delicate in her hands, but still, there was a glimmer of hope, a spark of life. The road before her seemed to stretch endlessly, but finally, as she rounded a bend, she saw it, a sign for the clinic. Relief flooded through her chest, and for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. But it was short-lived. The clinic was still a few miles away, and she knew she couldn't waste another second. She pressed her foot harder on the accelerator, the engine roaring to life beneath her as she pushed forward. Determined to reach the clinic before it was too late. She didn't look back, not even for a moment. The puppy needed her now, and she couldn't afford to hesitate. The miles seemed to drag on forever, but the clinic was finally within sight. She could feel her chest tightening as the car approached, her heartbeat quickening with each passing second. She glanced at the puppy again, its tiny body so still, so fragile. She reached out for it, her hand trembling as she touched its fur once more. "We're almost there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. When she finally pulled into the clinic's parking lot, the sense of urgency that had been building in her chest all this time seemed to collapse in on itself. She grabbed the puppy, holding it gently in her arms, and ran toward the clinic doors, the world around her blurring as she focused solely on getting the puppy the help it needed. The receptionist looked up in surprise as the door burst open, but the protagonist barely registered her presence. She was already at the counter, her voice rising in desperation. "This puppy needs immediate care. It's been in the desert for hours. It's dehydrated, exhausted. Please help." The receptionist nodded, quickly pressing a button on the phone and calling for the vet. She motioned for the protagonist to follow her, and the two of them rushed down a hallway, the sound of their hurried footsteps echoing in the stillness of the clinic. The protagonist's heart was racing as she held the puppy in her arms. She had been so close to losing it. But now it was here, it was safe, and there was a chance. She clung to that chance, feeling it wrap around her like a thread of hope in the midst of all the uncertainty. The air inside the clinic is cool, a sharp contrast to the blistering heat outside. But inside her chest, the protagonist's heart races like a drumbeat, loud, erratic, impossible to ignore. She's barely registered the sterile smell of antiseptic, the buzz of fluorescent lights above her, or the indifferent clicking of keyboards behind the receptionist's desk. Her focus is on the puppy, cradled tightly in her arms as if by holding it, she could somehow will it to live. A nurse quickly leads them to a treatment room, the sterile white walls and faint scent of disinfectant surrounding them. The protagonist feels the walls closing in on her. Every second is crucial. She can't afford to lose it now. Not when she's this close. Not when the puppy's small, trembling body is so fragile. The nurse motions for her to sit on a nearby chair, but the protagonist refuses. She stands still, her fingers tightening around the puppy's tiny body, willing it to hold on just a little longer. The door swings open, and a young vet steps inside, her face calm and composed. But there's something behind her eyes, something that feels like understanding. She's seen this before. The desperation in the eyes of an animal's rescuer, the fight for a life that seems too fragile to win. She doesn't waste any time, her voice steady and reassuring. "Let me take a look at the puppy." The protagonist hesitates for a split second before she gently places the puppy onto the cold metal table. Unable to ignore the ache in her chest as she does so, the vet moves quickly, expertly, checking the puppy's pulse, examining its labored breathing, and immediately starting an IV drip to hydrate it. The quiet beeping of machines fills the air, a stark reminder of how precariously this little life hangs in the balance. The protagonist's mind races. She watches every movement the vet makes, every needle, every drip, her hands trembling at her sides. The puppy's body still trembles. It's breathing shallow, but now there's hope. She forces herself to breathe steadily, focusing on the vet's words. "We'll need to monitor it closely for the next few hours," the vet says, glancing up briefly. "The dehydration is severe, and it's in critical condition. But it's alive. That's the first step." The words land with a heavy weight. The first step. The hope that had begun to sprout when she found the puppy out there in the desert seems small, fragile in her mind now, but she holds on to it. It's alive. The vet works quickly, but methodically, attaching a small oxygen mask to the puppy's face. The protagonist watches, her eyes locked on the tiny figure on the table. The pup's body is limp, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, but every rise, every fall, feels like a victory. The vet looks at her, offering a reassuring smile. "It's going to be a tough road ahead, but I think it has a good chance. You did the right thing bringing it in. That's the most important part." The protagonist doesn't respond immediately. She's still processing everything. The desert, the heat, the fear that almost consumed her when she found the puppy's limp body. The guilt that had clawed at her when she realized how close she had come to losing it. It's all too much, and for a brief moment the weight of it threatens to break her. But then she looks at the puppy again, its small, fragile form, and something inside her shifts. She's not giving up on it. Not now, not after all this. "Thank you," she finally whispers, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you for saving it." The vet nods, her face a mixture of professional calm and quiet empathy. She pats the protagonist's shoulder lightly before stepping out of the room to check on another patient, leaving her alone with the puppy. The silence is heavy, but it's no longer the silence of despair. It's the silence of waiting, of hope in the air, fragile and tenuous but real nonetheless. The protagonist moves to the puppy's side, her hand reaching out, brushing its fur gently. She strokes the puppy's head, watching the tiny rise and fall of its chest. The little life is still fighting, and so she will fight with it. She won't leave until it's strong enough to stand on its own. She won't give up on it, not when the puppy has already come this far. The hours pass in a blur of quiet anticipation. The vet comes in periodically to check on the puppy's progress, adjusting the fluids, adding more oxygen as needed. The puppy remains stable, but the vet is cautious, reminding the protagonist that the first few days will be the hardest. But every time she glances at the small figure on the table, a sense of peace settles over her. The worst is over. The puppy is alive, and that is the first and most important victory. She sits by its side, the steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound filling the room. The air feels lighter now, the tension from earlier dissolving bit by bit. She watches the puppy's eyes flutter open for the first time since it was brought in, its gaze unfocused. But it's enough. A small miracle, one step at a time. The puppy's faint whimper pulls her from her thoughts. She leans closer, her voice soft. "You're going to be okay. I'm right here. You're not alone anymore." Days stretch into one another as the protagonist stays by the puppy's side, never leaving it for more than a few minutes at a time. The days are filled with small victories, the puppy's first solid meal, its first step, the wag of its tail as it begins to feel stronger. But each of these moments is hard-won. The puppy's recovery is slow, and though the worst is behind them, there are still setbacks. Its body, weakened by the desert's harshness, takes time to rebuild itself. The protagonist spends her days caring for the puppy, holding it, soothing it, talking to it, even though she knows the puppy is too young to understand her words. But there's a connection between them, a bond that's formed through the quiet hours of care, through the moments of vulnerability. She becomes the puppy's lifeline. In the evenings, when the clinic empties out and the city quiets, she takes the puppy home with her. She has a small apartment not far from the clinic, a place that's quiet, just big enough for the two of them. She sets up a little bed for the puppy in the corner of her living room, and it's there, amidst the comfort of home, that the puppy truly begins to heal. The protagonist watches as the puppy slowly regains its strength. Its coat begins to regain its sheen, its movements become more confident, and its playful nature starts to emerge. The first time it chases after a ball, tail wagging in excitement, is a moment she'll never forget. The puppy's joy is infectious, and she can't help but laugh as it stumbles over its own paws, still unsteady but determined to play. But despite the growing strength in the puppy, there's still a lingering fear in the protagonist's heart. What if it's not enough? What if the desert's harshness, the neglect, the trauma it faced, still lingers beneath the surface? She's seen it before. Animals that survive only to carry the scars of their past for the rest of their lives. She doesn't know if this puppy will ever truly be free of that, but she's determined to try. One evening, after the puppy has fallen asleep in her lap, she reflects on the journey that brought them here. The desert, the heat, the exhaustion, and the fear, they all seem so distant now, almost like a bad dream. But the bond they've formed is real, and it's something neither of them can ignore. It's a strange feeling, this hope, this quiet peace that has begun to settle into her heart. It's a feeling she didn't expect to have, not after the terror of finding the puppy in the desert, not after the sleepless nights, the uncertainty of whether or not the puppy would make it. But now, as she watches it sleep, her fingers gently stroking its fur, she realizes something. No matter what happens, she has done everything she could. She gave this puppy a second chance at life. And that's all anyone can ever do. The days blended into one another. The world outside the clinic seemed distant, unreal, as the protagonist focused solely on the puppy. She had become consumed with its recovery, with ensuring that it would never again have to face the brutal world alone. Each morning, she woke with the puppy by her side, a new day of care and healing stretching out before her. But despite the puppy's growing strength, she never let her guard down. The clinic had been a life-saving oasis for the puppy, and now she had taken on the role of caretaker, of protector, her apartment slowly transforming into a sanctuary for the small creature that had clawed its way back from the brink of death. She watched every movement closely. The way the puppy's tail twitched slightly when it slept, the way its tiny paws flexed as it stretched, the way its eyes flickered open in the mornings, still heavy with sleep. It wasn't the same fragile puppy she had found in the desert, desperate and near death. No, this one was stronger, more resilient. But sometimes, in the quiet of her apartment, when the puppy was curled up on its blanket or chasing after a ball in the living room, she still caught glimpses of the terror it had lived through. The way it flinched at loud sounds, the way it froze if she reached for it too quickly. The past had not been easy on the puppy, and the scars, though invisible, were still there, carved deep into its heart. She had come to understand that healing wasn't just about physical recovery. It was about rebuilding trust, piece by piece. The puppy had to relearn what it meant to be safe, to be loved. And so she spent each day patient, each day nurturing this tiny life, gently coaxing it out of the shadows of its past and into the warmth of her home. At first, the puppy would not venture far from her side. It would curl up in her lap or sit at her feet, constantly seeking her touch, her warmth, and her presence. But over time, as the days turned into weeks, the puppy grew bolder. It began to explore the apartment, its little nose twitching as it sniffed the corners of the room. There were times when it would hesitate at the door, its body trembling as though it was unsure of the world beyond its small, safe space. But each time, she was there to reassure it. "You're okay," she would say softly, her voice calm and steady.
"You're safe here."
And with those words, the puppy would relax, inching closer to the door, slowly pushing past its fears. As the puppy's physical recovery continued, the protagonist also watched its personality begin to emerge. The playful nature, the curiosity, the trust, it all returned in time. There were moments when the puppy would leap around, its tail wagging wildly as it chased after a ball or pounced on a toy. And in those moments, the protagonist felt her heart swell with joy, knowing that she had been a part of something miraculous. She had saved this life, and now, this tiny creature was showing her what it truly meant to live. Still, there were moments of doubt. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet, and the puppy was finally asleep, curled up beside her, she would stare out the window, her mind racing. What if the puppy still carried the scars of the desert? What if it never fully recovered, never fully trusted again? What if she wasn't enough? There were no answers to these questions, no certainty. All she could do was keep moving forward, one day at a time, and hope that the love she had given the puppy would be enough to heal its spirit. One Saturday morning, she woke to the sound of gentle scratching at her door. She had grown used to the small noises of her home, but this one was different. It was a soft, almost hesitant scratch, followed by a quiet whimper. She immediately sat up in bed, her heart racing. The puppy had been sleeping soundly beside her only moments ago. She swung her legs out of bed and padded softly to the door, her hand brushing against the cool wood. When she opened it, the puppy stood on the other side, its eyes wide and full of wonder. It had ventured out into the hallway. Her heart swelled with both pride and fear. The puppy was becoming bolder, more confident. But she knew it wasn't just about the physical space. It was a sign that it was beginning to explore the emotional boundaries it had built for itself. She crouched down to its level, her voice gentle. "What are you doing out here, little one?" She reached for the puppy, scooping it up into her arms. It didn't resist, curling into her embrace. The warmth of its small body against her chest was a constant reminder of how fragile life could be, how fleeting. The puppy licked her cheek, its tiny tongue brushing against her skin. It was a simple gesture, but it filled her with overwhelming emotion. She smiled softly, her eyes moistening at the beauty of the moment. "You're getting stronger, aren't you?" she whispered. Later that afternoon, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, the puppy's energy reached new heights. It darted across the living room, chasing after a squeaky toy, its tiny legs moving with an eager determination. The protagonist sat on the couch watching the puppy, her heart full. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so proud of something, so connected to another living being. This tiny creature had come from the brink of death, had fought against all odds to survive, and now here it was, alive, thriving, and full of life. But just as the puppy pounced on the toy for the 5th time, it froze, its body tense, its ears pressed flat against its skull. The playful gleam in its eyes dimmed for a moment. The silence in the room thickened as the puppy's gaze shifted toward the window, where the last of the daylight faded into the evening. The protagonist's breath caught in her throat. The puppy had stopped playing, its body rigid with fear. She knew the signs. It had seen something, heard something, that triggered its anxiety. She was familiar with this, with the way the puppy's past haunted it. Even though it was stronger now, the shadows of the desert still lingered in its mind. She reached for the puppy, her fingers brushing through its fur. "It's okay, sweetie," she murmured softly, holding it close. "You're safe now. Nothing will hurt you here." The puppy's body slowly relaxed, the tension in its muscles easing as it turned back toward her, seeking the comfort of her presence. It wasn't much, but it was progress. The fear, the memories of abandonment and trauma, were still there, lurking beneath the surface. But for now, it was okay. It had survived, and that, in itself, was a victory. As the night crept in, the puppy snuggled into her lap, exhausted from the day's activity. The protagonist stroked its fur gently, her mind drifting as the rhythmic sound of the puppy's breathing filled the room. She thought back to the desert, to the moment when she had found the puppy, abandoned and alone. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet it had only been weeks. In that short time, the puppy had become a part of her life, a constant companion, and she had become a part of its. She glanced out the window, the stars beginning to shine brightly against the darkening sky. The world outside was vast, full of possibilities, full of dangers. But in this small, quiet moment, it didn't matter. The puppy was safe. It had a future. And for the first time since she had found it in the desert, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. She leaned down and kissed the top of the puppy's head, her voice barely a whisper. "You're home now, and I'm never going to let you go." The days blur together in a peaceful rhythm now, the kind of quiet that only comes when two lives, once fragile and uncertain, have found a place of comfort with each other. The puppy's fur is soft again, its body no longer trembling with the raw fragility of the past. It's growing stronger, each day a new step in its journey. The protagonist watches as the puppy runs across the yard, its legs still awkward, but the joy in its movements undeniable. The soft, rhythmic sound of its paws hitting the grass fills the air, and for a brief moment, everything feels right. The bond between them has grown into something unspoken, yet profoundly real. The puppy, once terrified and broken, has become her constant companion, always by her side. She watches the little creature, her heart swelling with pride, with love. The puppy's energy is contagious, filling the once empty space of her apartment with laughter and warmth. But even as the puppy recovers, the protagonist can't help but feel the weight of the past. The harsh desert, the lonely, dry land where she had found it, helpless and abandoned. There are days when the puppy freezes, when it shudders at the sound of a car engine or the sharpness of a sudden movement. It's a reminder of how deeply the past has scarred it. But those moments are fleeting now, as the puppy learns that this new life, this new world, is safe. She knows that with each day, it heals just a little bit more. The protagonist's own healing process has mirrored the puppy's in ways she hadn't expected. The weight of rescuing an animal so close to death, the responsibility of providing for it, of caring for it, it has changed her. She sees the world a little differently now, perhaps more aware of its fragility, but also more aware of the quiet moments of beauty that exist in it. She has become a part of the puppy's story, and the puppy has become a part of hers. One afternoon, as the sun sets behind them, the puppy trots up to her, its tail wagging enthusiastically. It nudges her hand with its nose, looking up at her expectantly. She smiles softly, her heart light, and bends down to scoop the puppy into her arms. "What's the matter, little one?" she asks, her voice soft and playful. The puppy licks her face in response, a joyful bark escaping from its tiny mouth. There is nothing but love in its eyes now, no trace of the fear or abandonment it once carried. The puppy's tail wags with such excitement that it nearly knocks over a flower pot sitting on the nearby table. She laughs, a sound that feels like freedom. For the first time, she truly believes that everything will be okay. The puppy, once left for dead in the scorching heat, is now alive, thriving, and full of life. And she has found herself in the process. In caring for this small, helpless creature, she has discovered a depth of love she never thought possible. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, she holds the puppy close, the warmth of its body against hers a reminder of how far they've come. The journey has been difficult, but it's been worth it. "I'm so proud of you," she whispers, her voice thick with emotion. The puppy looks up at her, its eyes filled with trust, and in that moment, she knows that this is just the beginning. Together, they will face whatever comes next. And they will do it as a family, in the quiet of the evening, with the stars beginning to appear in the sky above them. The protagonist feels something stir inside her, a sense of peace, of belonging. She and the puppy are no longer just survivors, they are a team. And as long as they have each other, nothing else matters.